Welcome to the BlackDoctor Speak Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Renee. Today, I am so excited. We have a really amazing guest, Holliday, and I never, you guys, give introductions, as you know, but she is a seasoned attorney, civic leader, and advocate for voting rights with a strong commitment to empowering marginalized communities. As the president of Sisters Lead, Sisters Vote, Holliday focuses on amplifying the voices of Black women in the political sphere and ensuring equitable access to voting. Her career spans decades of service in both the legal and political arenas, where she has worked tirelessly to protect civil rights and foster civic engagement. Holliday's leadership and advocacy continue to inspire and mobilize voters across the nation. So I was introduced to you on the lovely Win with Black Women call. And yes, I was on that infamous 40,000 Black women call.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yes, that was amazing.
That was amazing.
But as you and I both know, it is so important to vote in all elections, local as well as national. But particularly, we have a whole lot that is at stake at this coming election. It really is a life or death situation. So what are the key issues at stake for the Black community in this upcoming presidential election?
Yeah, I mean, I think it may be too dramatic to say everything in our lives, but it really is everything in our lives. I think for a lot of people, they will focus on the economics, but the economics leads to health, leads to education, leads to technology, the environment, all of the hot button issues. They are very interconnected and interrelated. And I can make an argument to where they're all the same thing. So I'm going to shortcut it and say everything you care about in your life is on the ballot. And I mean, and in a way that we have not seen before, because I also recognize that when we say that, it feels like rhetoric that we've heard before. And it is, but also recognizing that in today's climate and the future climate, especially over the course of the last several election cycles, this country has continued to be more polarized. And it is in that polarization that these issues become more and more acute. So last time was the most important election, but this time is even more important because of that polarization.
Yes, definitely. And historically, how have Black voters how's the Black vote turnout been as far as influencing the election results? Because, you know, you've heard your cousins say, well, my vote doesn't count.
Listen, and I love that this is a conversation that's not just about this election. So first of all, your vote counts. And I say this, you know, I have a law firm, and in my law firm, we practice criminal defense. And so I'm going to say it like I've said to some of my clients. If it didn't have any value, then why would you steal it? You wouldn't. You wouldn't steal it if it didn't have any value. So why do you think people are working so hard to make sure that you can't register, making it hard for you to get your rights back if you lose them, making it hard for you to even find your voting location, and they're moving it all around, creating the most narrow access to the ballot. It's because it's so important that if they can do anything to distract, confuse, or have you have disdain, they win. And the they is any and everybody who seeks to prevent you from exercising your right to vote. So understand its value, if nothing else, based on the millions of dollars and millions of folks, not just here in the United States, but around the world, that don't want you to do it. So that's another way to think about its value. I also just want to say a note about, and then the less people in your community that vote, the more valuable your vote is. So actually, while we have the highest number of people that tend to vote in presidential elections, your vote is even more valuable percent-wise when we have low turnout elections, because there's less people voting. And that's just statistics. So you should be looking to vote any and every time you can. You should recognize that your vote is your power. And I don't know about you, but I'm not trying to give up none of my power. I'm just trying to get some more.
Bingo. That. And then you know,
Bingo.
the other thing is, when you don't vote, really, you are giving a vote to the other side. So
Yeah,
whomever you didn't want to vote for. So
yeah,
I think
absolutely.
that it's, think of it that way too. Can you explain the connection between voting and addressing systemic racism and inequality in America?
Again, all of these things are connected. Listen, in almost every, and I say almost because there's one area in our country where we've been able to to close the racial disparity gap. But in 99.9% of the areas of world that we care about, there is a huge disparity gap around what happens, and that disparity falls along racial lines as well as economic lines. The one case where we have in our history where we've closed the disparity gap is with COVID. And in COVID, we actually, and you as a doctor, I know you know this, we actually were able to go from 5 times the number of deaths per 100,000 of white patients, and we actually closed that to 0 per 100,000. And that had to do with the very intentional and precise efforts of not just the World Health Organization, but the Biden administration to include equity data when dispersing vaccines, when dispersing testing, and overall care. He made sure that the administration, in their oversight of these very, frankly, life-changing protocols, ensured that we started with communities that were most affected first and then branched out. And in doing so and in applying these equity measures, we saw for the first time in our history a disparity go from 5 times to nothing. And so that, to me, if you can't use that to help you figure out who you're supposed to vote for, I don't know what I can tell you. But I don't know. I mean, these are the kinds of experiences that mean something to me. To your point, when we continue to live in an environment where supremacy systems dictate how we are with one another, I am certainly looking for an administration and a government that recognizes that and is looking for those solutions. Because if you ain't looking for them, I'm going to tell you one thing, it's not going to happen organically. It's only going to happen intentionally.
This is true. This is true. And this is true. And I mean, COVID was just, like I think if you don't vote for any other reason, vote because you know somebody who knows somebody that lost someone in COVID. And that's it.
Yes, that's it. That's it.
Because that was a disaster. And if you didn't know how much of a disaster was, do yourself a favor and Google and see smaller countries that do not have as much money as we do and see how COVID happened for them. It
absolutely.
was there and it was gone. It was just real quick. Listen, everyone did what they needed to do and they got rid of it.
And again, did not have, in 2020, under the Trump administration, from March 2020 to January 2021, we saw those disparities grow, right? And it was because they were employing a system that was broken to disperse care.
Right.
And then that system, broken as it was, again, using a kind of organic, because it was already there, they didn't seek to do any changes, using a broken system to disperse medical care gave you inequitable results. You have to have someone who comes in and says, this crap is broken. So before we start just sending care, we need to help fix this system so that when we send care, we're not losing lives.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, and COVID is real. Everyone, COVID is still out there. This is
COVID is
BlackDoctor
still
Speak.
out
So
there.
please, there is a new vaccine. Make your appointments, get your new vaccine, because I just read somebody who
Keep
I just read about
testing,
someone
keep
who talked about,
testing.
yep, keep testing. They have new test kits for free. They just posted, I think they just announced that
They just
Monday or
announced it.
something this week.
Mm-hmm,
Yep.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So please, please get your test kits and, you know, all of that, so that you can make certain that you know if somebody does get sick, and so you can take the
Absolutely.
protocols, because people are still getting sick. So,
They
and this
are.
variant is different than the others, so definitely make sure you're covered.
You
Um,
know,
yeah. So this election is really important for our younger generation. And can you
yes.
speak to that? Why it is especially important for young Black voters
Well,
to please get out?
they're gonna be around longer than me. So they're gonna, I mean, it's not even that hard. Y'all probably gonna live longer than you got more years ahead of you than I have ahead of me. So you're gonna have to deal with the consequences of what's happening now much longer than I will. I'm gonna have to deal with the consequences of what we've done before now, more so than you had to, and you got to deal with the consequences of what's coming. I want young people to get empowered and feel like they should be in control of what happens to them next. So the reason they should vote is because they want to take control of their future, because they want to have a say in what happens next, and lays the foundation for what will happen for the next generation, whether that be because they care about their own children or future children, or just kids in general. Somebody's coming next, and we always have to be thinking about not just our own generation, but the generations ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yes, please. And I cannot stress enough, if you are over 18, if you this will be your first election, make sure you have done all
Yes.
the research to figure out, because you know now, since kids have gone back to school, kids are starting school, they left their home states. Find out the rules. Can you get an absentee ballot? I know when I went away to college, I got an absentee ballot. But
Yeah.
can you get an absentee ballot, or do you register in that state that you're in? Whatever. Find out all that information and make
Yeah. Make your choices. And listen, voting can be a group or team activity.
Yep.
So yesterday, I'm going to out her. She's probably going to get upset, but I'm going to out her. One of my cousins is a freshman at Langston University in Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
And so I called her up. I'm checking on her. And I said, "Hey, by the way, are you registered to vote?" She says, "Oh, Auntie," she says, "everybody in our dorm is registered to vote." I said, "How you know everybody in your dorm is registered to vote?" She said, "Because this program came through and they had a Chick-fil-A party. And we got Chick-fil-A for going down and registering to vote. And we were all hungry that day. So we all went down and had Chick-fil-A and we registered to vote. So everybody, all of the freshmen on campus are registered to vote." So I said, "Okay, yay Langston and yay Chick-fil-A for making sure y'all was registered to vote." I said, "Well, where are you registered?" And she said, "Well, as you know, I was already registered because I registered before I came to school, because I turned 18 before I came to school, and I'm registered at home." I said, "Okay, great." She lives in Oklahoma City, which is about an hour and a half away from Langston. I said, "All right, well, what's the plan to vote?" In Oklahoma, they have very restrictive voting laws, including a very short early vote period, which is only 4 days. And guess when the 4 days are? October 30th, October 31st, November 1st, and November 2nd, which is Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and that's it. Now, whether you believe you should celebrate Halloween or engage in Halloween activities or not is your business. But this is a Black college campus, and when I said this is when you can early vote, she was like, "Well, we have to take Friday and Saturday off the list, because I can tell you right now, there will be no voting happening October 34th or the day after, which is a Saturday. So I'm just keeping it real with you. That's not happening." I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, are you going to be able to get to Oklahoma City to vote before?" No. Turns out we had missed the deadline for absentee ballot. I said, "Okay, well, what we going to do?" We realized, looking at the rules, that she actually needed to re-register re-register at Langston. I said, well, is there anything in Oklahoma City that you care about that you want to vote for? So we looked at a sample ballot. She said, nope, I don't care enough about that to vote. I'm good voting in Langston. So we re-registered her, changed her address. She's now going to be voting from Langston. Turned out her whole suite, except for one poor girl who's 17 and won't turn 18 till the day after election. She was heartbroken. But the other 3 roommates are all going. We actually scheduled an Uber because we found the early vote site, which is 16 minutes away from campus. Scheduled an Uber to come get them right after class. The 3 of them are going to take that Uber, vote, and come back to campus. That's how you make a vote plan.
Okay, so that is really fancy. And now you've given me something to think about. I call her my niece, but my best friend's daughter has just started school and she's 18. And I forgot to ask her about that. She just moved in this week. So they start school next week. So I will talk to her about that and encourage her to help. Because I actually said to my mom, we have our campaign about take 4 more to the polls.
Yes, we do. And I got my 3, by the way, in case Madam Supreme is watching, because I got my cousin and her 2 roommates. So I got 1 more to go. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're right. And so because I don't drive here in Chicago, I don't drive. So my mother said, what you going to do? Take them on the bus? I said, on the bus, or if we have to walk, call Uber, whatever we got to do, I got to get my 4 people. So now the wonderful thing about Chicago is that we can early vote for weeks. And so early voting does start soon. I think in the next few weeks it starts. And I love it because, and I've early voted in all the elections except for during COVID, I voted by mail. But the early voting, you can vote at any of the precincts, which is so awesome. So I can just be walking downtown. There's the precinct and go vote. And I love that because when I worked out with her, I would just early vote on my way home from work one day. I'd stop at a library and I'd vote. And, early voting, there's no lines usually.
Listen, it's a beautiful thing.
Exactly. It's wonderful.
Listen, I am here in Maryland and I love a drop box. I get my absentee ballot in Maryland. They will send you your ballot via email. So you don't even have to go anywhere or wait for anything. They send you your ballot via email. They give you a little code. You print it out. It comes with the little code. You sit at home, and then I just drop it off in the nearest box whenever I'm out and about, and I drop it in the thing. I've even mailed, I'm ashamed to say, at like midnight when I'm out and about coming from something and stopped by the drop box and just dropped it in. It definitely wasn't no line. I barely got out the car.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I will say there's a lot of states that make it very convenient for you. I know at the DNC, my aunt, she is a part of the she's part of the Postal Workers Union, and she had a booth there, and it was called Vote from Home. And so that was really cool because I think that there's more people eligible now. You don't have to have an excuse. Like, remember back in the day, you had to have an excuse.
Some states you still have to have an excuse, but I love that we have more and more states that are moving away from that. I read a statistics just this morning. It was sent to me because I'm a geek and I read random voting information. 44 million people across this country have requested absentee ballots. That could mean that nearly 45% of the electorate will vote absentee.
Oh, wow.
So it's real and it's a thing.
It is so real. And there's another thing I want you to talk about, because what frustrated me so was that I went to bed thinking that we had our first female president a few years ago. And I woke up and was quite disturbed that something had went awry. Can you please explain the Electoral College for those that don't understand? And then explain, because I just recently heard it explained, how the whole thing was set up against us.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things. So the Electoral College, how it works, let me just deal with that. How it works is we start with the popular vote. That's very important. And then, because this country has always had tension between national rights or federal rights and states' rights, So they did not want to create a situation where, because you come from a state or vote in a state that is so populous, that state can carry, and it will be irrelevant if any other state votes or not. And so, for instance, California, and I'm making this up, maybe has 20 million people. Mm-hmm. Now, keep in mind, the last election, we had about 160 million people vote. So it over indexes states with high population if you only use the popular vote. This is the theory, not where I stand personally, just the theory. So states like California, New York, Florida, Texas, you could have enough votes in just those 4 states that you really wouldn't have to talk to anybody else if you could get enough votes out of those 4 states. That's the theory. And so, because we wanted to encourage the founding people, whoever the heck they were, wanted to encourage candidates for president to talk to voters in every state, they came up with this formula of the Electoral College. So the popular vote by state determines how your Electoral College votes are cast. The Electoral College votes are cast by the way the state law determines that cast to happen. So there are a few states, for instance, that allow for that Electoral College vote to be split depending on how the voting ranks up, right? So if they have a split in the state, the Electoral College vote may split, but that is not the norm. That is the exception. So that's why your individual vote is important, because you're going to determine where those Electoral College votes go. Usually it is winner take all. So whatever you vote for your state, they get all the electoral votes. Interestingly enough, the problem that they were trying to address was keeping not over-indexing in big, large states. But guess what? They just shifted the problem to a different set of states. So now, based on both the popular vote and the Electoral College, we have created what's known as battleground states. This year, general consensus is going to be around states like Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. So while we have increased the number of states, we haven't really achieved a system that pushes candidates to campaign in all the states. We've just changed the rationale on how they get to pick the states that they campaign in. Either way, I think you got some flawed systems. We got some work to do on that. But hey, this is where we sit today.
So what's the magic number? We need 270.
270 is your magic number. And there are a number, and just in case you want to nerd out, there are a number of apps in the App Store that you can download to play with the map like Steve Kornacki does. And I do this.
I love him.
Geek. And I go, yeah, I think we can get Pennsylvania. Bam, that's how we got there. Or I move the maps around and change the colors to see all the possibilities to get to 270. But at the end of the day, just understand that while there is some misinformation about how your individual vote calculates back up to president, it is vital, because your vote will dictate how your state votes, and then that vote will dictate who wins. And it is possible, although we've only seen it a handful of times, well, actually only twice, where the popular vote and the vote for the Electoral College do not align. So that is actually a very unusual circumstance. And it is most likely to happen, here goes why, again, your vote's important, where the vote is very close. If you have a smackdown, you ain't having this problem. So when people come to me and they say, hey, my vote doesn't count, I've seen it where it doesn't, I said, yeah, that happens when it's close. But if we're out there and we're advocating strongly for the person who's not a criminal on this ballot, and we make it not a close race, but a smackdown race, we don't have to worry about that electoral college program. So the key to avoiding the mistake that you're concerned about is to get more people out to vote.
Exactly. And so
I can make a voting argument in any space, so don't test me.
Right. Hey, and look, around these parts and these days, you have to. You
got
hear the
to.
craziest mess.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
Miss Winfrey said last week that when she was at the airport, a black man walked up to her to let her know that he was voting for Trump. And it was because of that $1,200, which, you know, I was glad the gentleman did answer the question, but I wanted him to go into specifics because as a matter of fact, leaving the DNC,
yep,
I tried to leave, and I think about 5 Ubers canceled on me.
Yeah.
Needless to say, I was a little hot because I was getting tired of waiting, and I was tired, ready to go home. Because you know those nights were long. Well, then finally I get one, and it's this young black girl. She was 26, and girl, I think it was God that I was supposed to be in there because she said she didn't know what was going on, and she didn't know why the traffic was so bad. And I said, it's the DNC. So she said, I don't know what that is. So I told her what it was. She still didn't quite understand. So then I explained, this is where the Democratic Party is going to announce who their candidate will be on the ballot. Oh, so then she goes, I'm voting for Kamala. I said, oh, okay. And she said, but I know that a lot of my friends are not. And the reason is because Trump gave them $1,200 checks. And I said, well, did you know that he actually didn't give them those checks? It was the Democratic Party that got them those checks, and that he was trying to hold things up because he wanted to sign the checks. And she said, no, I didn't know that. I said, yeah. So can you go back and tell them that, please, before they do something stupid?
Listen.
And so I felt like that was God. I was supposed to be in that 6th Uber.
That was God. That was absolutely God. That was all the Trinity come down and being like, look, Dr. Renee, we need you in this moment to get your sister, get the young sister, and evangelize to her where her holy decisions need to be made. We sent you to prophesize and let her know. And, you know, I feel like that all the time because going back to my story with my little cousins, she said, you know, Auntie, I'm so glad that you have exposed me to different things because even though I really don't like politics, I know who I'm supposed to vote for. I said, okay, that's great. She said, and I had to use that information recently. I said, really? She said, yeah, because my friends, we were sitting around at a hangout or she called it a kickback. Let me get my language right. So while I'm embarrassing her, I'm at least using the right terms. She said, we were at a kickback and they were actually talking about voting for Trump as a joke. Wouldn't it be funny? What would happen? And she was like, she said, I had to stop the presses on him. She said, I had to stop the conversation. I said, hold up. She said, I don't think you all understand what you're saying. She said, let me explain to you what Trump has done. And she gave him a few things from her own experience. And one of the things was the canceling of student loan debts for her grandmother. And she talked about how significant that was and that it instantly changed the economy of their household because she lived with her mom and grandmother in the same home. And it enabled them to have a level up moment that they have now been able to sustain. And dare I say, in the way she described it, helped to facilitate her college education because they had those extra resources that were no longer going to pay for a college debt that was decades old.
Exactly.
And imagine that multiplied by 43 million people.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the kinds of things where I think the right thing is, and you mentioned this with the $1,200, we got to connect the things that are happening directly in people's lives to their vote. And the $1,200 is an example. The student loan debt is an example. These child tax care credits is an example.
That's what I was just about to say too. Yeah, $6,000 infants for new infants. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And let me tell you, there should not be a union member in this country that is not voting for Kamala Harris because of them, during COVID again, they were able to remain working and did not miss a paycheck. And not to mention, the National Labor Relations Board has been strengthened to be more protective of workers' rights. And that is not going to happen in a Trump administration. I'm not even sure if he understands what it is to be a part of a union family. So there's so many reasons, but here's what it all boils back down to, Dr. Renee. You gotta vote. Whatever you're doing, you gotta vote. You ain't even in the game if you don't vote.
Yeah, you can't complain. You can't nothing. You
can't do nothing.
Vote. You got.
My daddy used to say, "You don't even matter." Now I'm not quite as extreme as him, but he used to tell us, if you want to matter, you have to vote. And what he really was saying was, you are an invisible entity without the vote. And why would you purposely make yourself invisible and not be seen? It's already enough people out here trying to do that. Don't do it to yourself.
Exactly. And so I'm going to finish with this one story. My first time voting was for a presidential election. I don't remember the year, but it was in 1994. So whoever was that year, 94. So I was a freshman at Michigan State University. I had my voter registration before I got there. I was like, okay, we're good. No, I turned 18 my first week of school. So they had people going around campus. I registered to vote. I'm good. Everything's great. So I go, the registration, the voting precinct was downstairs from where I lived, literally in my dorm. So I was like, tomorrow morning, I'm going to go. I hate lines. So I was like, I'm going to go early. So and I'm all excited to vote and told my grandma I'm voting and I'm so excited. And I go, and the lady's like, your name's not on here. I said, excuse me?
Oh, no.
Your name's not on here. And I said, okay, well, that has to be an error because I know I registered, So she's like, well, you need to go talk to such and such. So needless to say, I had classes that day. So I got to go to class, but I have to go talk to such and such. So I ended up having to go to whatever this city of East Lansing building or whatever, which was off campus, had to go over there, talk to them. So at like 5 o'clock in the evening, 6 o'clock in the evening, I come back. It's the same voting workers. The lady was like, I remember you from this morning. And I handed her the thing so now I can vote. And she goes, you went through all of that? And I said, ma'am, you don't understand. My grandmother was born in 1916 and she was not able to vote for a while. And then now she does not play. She don't miss an election. And I said, I told her I was going to vote. I was very excited about this. I said, I have, my relatives' ancestors died for my right to vote. I said, I'd be a fool. The voting was downstairs. It was not even, I had to go anywhere. I said, no, I said, so whatever I had to go through to get this corrected, I was just going to have to get it corrected because I couldn't go call my mother and say, well, I couldn't vote today. So I did. So that was the same thing. Cause I mean, they were sending me to a whole bunch of places, but it got
that is an amazing first time voter story.
Exactly. And I love they allowed me to vote. So that was wonderful to me. And and I voted in every election, although one time I had to do absentee. I lived overseas and they screwed up with the mailing of my ballot. And that was not my fault, obviously. But that was my one thing. And I am a Michigander, but of course I vote here in Illinois. Sorry, Michigan. But I am trying to do whatever I can to help Michigan out as well, so that we can make sure Michigan does turn blue. But thank you so much for this.
Thank you for having me. This is an amazing conversation and so important to have it with an audience that may not be talking about voting as much. So I'd like you for that.
And you know what else? I am like your cousin. I am not political at all. I did some phone calls for Obama the first election.
Yep.
And then like I said, I don't do politics. I just vote.
Yep.
Then when COVID happened, kind of interfered with my realm, which is health. And so that's when I had to kind of get out a political hat and I had to kind of pay attention because things were going so crazy. And so we actually, me and my friend, Dr. Kelly Wood, she's an endocrinologist in Atlanta, Georgia, we did live streams every single week for like, oh my God, it was a lot of weeks. And we talked about COVID because there were so many changes and people didn't understand.
Yeah,
We needed to inform our communities, and we're both West Indian heritage as well. And so the West Indian, you know, in WhatsApp, there was all sorts of strange things happening, you know, and bad messaging. So we wanted to make sure. So that was when I said, okay, I have to pay somewhat attention to politics because politics has kind of interrupted my arena of healthcare.
Yeah.
So, and then of course, this election, my God.
My gosh. Yes.
We cannot, you know, and plus as a woman, oh no, we cannot play with what is, you know, you've got to.
We're going to make sure when you wake up this time, she's going to really be elected. No,
right.
We're not going to have the okey doke from the last time. I know that was traumatizing.
Please,
listen,
Lord.
I just want to end and say this. Sisters Lead, Sisters Vote is dedicated to just the type of experience that you had. We don't expect everybody to do all the things or be crazy political like I can sometimes be, but we do think it's important that we help Black women especially understands how politics intersects with your life and how you can be responsible and engaged in that intersection. Not in all the things, but just the things that really touch and concern you. And we're really dedicated to helping to inform and promote leadership around that. So thank you so much for having me as a part of this wonderful podcast.
Thank you for coming. And so thank you everyone for listening. This has been the BlackDoctor Speak Podcast, and it's presented to you by the African American Wellness Project. And of course, you can visit their website at aawellness.org. And we will have all of Holly Holliday's lovely links in the show notes, but at Sisters Lead is where you can find her. And thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. Everyone, please go vote. Hold on.